today we're going to make this festive fabric bunting. I have a list of all of the things you're going to need for this. So fabric scraps, bias tape, a rotary cutter and mat or scissors, ruler, pins, thread, a point turner, marking pencil, and your iron, and of course your sewing machine. So the first thing we're going to do is make these triangles. And the way that I do that is I want my triangles to be 5 inches tall and 6 inches on each side. So I've got 2 pieces here. So I'm going to show you how I do that. So I've got my fabric here, I've got 2 pieces together, and I'm going to cut strips that are 5 inches tall. So do a cut here, and then I'm going to count 5 inches over and make another cut. And then we're going to flip it around. I'm going to put my ruler at this point here, and then I'm going to count 3 squares over. And this is going to be my halfway point. So you want your ruler to line up at that halfway point back to this beginning point. And you're going to do the same thing on the other side. So this was your halfway point, so you're going to go 1, 2, 3. So that's my other end, and my ruler is going to meet this center point. And there's your triangle. So now I'm going to sew all these triangles together with a quarter inch seam, and I'm just going to go along the 2 sides, and I'm going to leave this top side open. One side, and then I'm going to make sure my needle is in the down position, and then I'm just going to turn it. And then the back stitch on the ends, and then without cutting my thread, I'm going to sew the next one. So this is called chain piecing, and it's a way to sew many small things together without cutting your thread in between. It helps to save thread. It just makes things really nice and quick, and you just snip them all at the end. So this is what it looks like when you do chain piecing. You end up with all these pieces strung together with a little length of thread between them. And it just makes it really easy. You don't have to keep stopping and starting and trimming your threads. You can just trim all those threads at the end. Okay, so once that part is done, you've got this chain of little bunting flags, and you'll just trim the threads between them. Okay, and then the next thing you're going to do is trim these little points on all of them. And that will help you get a really nice sharp point when you turn them right side out. So now we're going to flip all of these triangles right sides out and use our point turner to press those points out. And then give that a press. So once we have all of these pressed, we're going to take our snips and just cut the little ears off of the tops of your triangles. Make sure they're nice and straight across the top. Okay, so now we're going to make our bias tape. So I've cut these strips to be 2.5 inches wide. And I lay it across right sides together. And I'm going to pin them like so. And I'm going to sew this line right here. And I find it does help to mark a line on there. When you're going on the bias, it can sometimes be tricky to stay straight. So usually I'll do a bunch like this, and then I'll sew them all at once. Make sure to flip your fabric over to the right side each time. Okay, so now we're going to sew a diagonal line across here on all those strips. Okay, so now you're going to cut all of these corners off your bias strips. Like so.
Depending on how, what do you? Oh, because it's too big for me. Yeah. I'm deciding how to alter it.
And then you're going to bring it over to the ironing board, and we're going to press these seams open. So over at my ironing board, I'm going to press the seams open. And then I'm going to fold the tape in half, and I'm going to press that in half. I'm going to do that all the way along to the end. And then I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to fold each side towards the center. And I'm going to press that. So basically I'm creating a double fold bias tape where all of the raw edges are enclosed. So once they're folded in toward the middle and pressed, I'm going to fold it in half again. And then press that down. And we're just going to do that along the whole length of the bias tape, all the way to the end. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put all of the flags into the bias tape. So I'm going to fold it in half just so I can figure out where my center is. I've made about 2 meters of bias tape. So I'm going to put a pin about halfway through so I can work out from the center. I've got about 10 flags here, so I'm going to take the 2 in the middle and I'm going to kind of lay them out just to see how close I want to have them together. I'm thinking I'll probably do about 1 inch apart, and that will ensure that they all fit. So once I'm happy with the layout, I'll start pinning them into the bias tape. So I'll take the first one, I'm going to open up the bias tape and kind of lay it in there and just fold the bias tape over top of it and pin it into place. And I'm going to try to make sure that it's laying nice and flat and that my bias tape is kind of lined up straight, so that when I sew the 2 pieces together, I'm sewing through all 3 layers. So I'm sewing through the bunting flag and I'm also sewing through 2 layers of bias tape. And I'm just using the measurements on the cutting mat to ensure that all of my flags are placed about 1 inch apart. Once I get to the end of the bias tape, I'm just going to take this raw edge and fold it in so that I can enclose it when I sew the bias tape together. So once I bring it over to the machine, I want to make sure that I sew across this edge before I start sewing down the rest of the bias tape. And since it's a top stitch, I'm going to sew fairly close to the edge, but making sure that I'm catching both layers of the fabric. It's probably about 1/8 of an inch. And once we reach the end of the bias tape, remember to turn your work so that you can sew across that last folded edge to enclose the raw bits. And there you go, your bunting's all ready. Let us know if you make one.